My people, the maps reveal the enemy's path. They will strike from the northern pass. We must act now, fortify the villages. Our unity will prevail. Knights of the realm, before us lies our sacred charge. For honor and glory, forward! Let our banners fly high! Leopold!
Only 1,500 Swiss farmers, without royal weapons, without heavy armor, without professional combat training, had nothing but sharpened wooden sticks as their only hope. Opposing them stood Europe's most terrifying war force, 9,000 elite knights clad in expensive steel armor, masters of mounted combat, whose entire lives were devoted to the art of war. This was an unequal battle, one where the outcome should have seemed obvious at first glance.
Soldiers of the realm, the hour of battle is upon us. Advance as one, let our steel sing.
But history would record something entirely different. As the sun slowly leaned toward the western sky, a terrifying truth began to unfold. The age of chivalry and knights, once believed invincible for centuries, was beginning to collapse within a narrow Swiss mountain pass. And in that very pass, one of the most unexpected chapters in the history of warfare was being written. Within just 90 minutes, ordinary farmers with nothing but wooden sticks killed more than 2,000 heavily armed elite knights. This was no ordinary clash. This was the moment when medieval Europe's thousand-year-old social structure trembled for the first time and began to break from within. After this, warfare would never be the same again. By the end of this video, you won't just know a battle. You'll understand how the entire strategy of war in Europe changed. You will discover how a simple farming tool became one of the most feared symbols of weaponry in European history, why those terrifying knights, once thought invincible, suddenly became obsolete.
Forward for glory!
And what three revolutionary tactics changed the future of warfare forever? The first mystery, a secret battle formation that turned ordinary farmers into a force capable of defeating trained warriors. The second mystery, why even the most expensive and powerful armor in the world became a death trap. And the third mystery, how this single afternoon gave rise to a terrifying mercenary force that would dominate European battlefields for the next 200 years. But one terrifying truth sets the Battle of Morgarten apart from every other peasant uprising.
Onward, brothers! We march for the fallen, for honor and the realm.
These were not starving, helpless peasants rising with forks or crude sticks. These were free men, born in the mountains, who had learned to turn the terrain itself into a weapon. They had discovered a deadly strategy, how to transform the entire landscape into a lethal weapon. Now the question is, how could wooden sticks defeat steel armor? How did ordinary farmers defeat professional soldiers, trained since childhood? And why did Duke Leopold, one of Europe's most powerful rulers, become so obsessed with completely destroying these mountain farmers?
Knights, the enemy advances. Our strategy is here. We strike their flank, here at the pass. Yes, my lord! Prepare the troops. We march at dawn.
The feudal system that had ruled Europe for nearly 500 years was now about to face the greatest and most terrifying test in its history. Three questions will keep circling in your mind. How do you kill a man completely encased in 60 pounds of steel armor? What truly happens when the entire battlefield itself becomes your weapon?
The northern flank is vulnerable. Agreed. We must reinforce it immediately. Our reserves can deploy by dawn. Good. See to the preparations.
And why did this single victory terrify kings thousands of miles away? Now we step into the stage of one of the most unbelievable military disasters in medieval history. The year is 1315. The Holy Roman Empire stretches across Central Europe, while the Habsburg dynasty's hunger for power grows stronger each day. Their next target, 3 small mountain communities known today as Switzerland, Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden. These forest cantons were completely unique in medieval Europe because they were under no king or lord, no noble ruler, no feudal master. They were free farming communities, governing themselves and making decisions together. But this very freedom was their greatest crime.
My lords, the hour is upon us. Study this map. Our armies will converge on the eastern border. The passes are fortified, my lord. Then we march at dawn.
To Duke Leopold I of Austria, the situation was entirely different. At just 25, he was ambitious, intelligent, and determined. His goal was to bring these stubborn mountain people under Habsburg control at any cost. He intended to be remembered as a glorious ruler, but to the Swiss he was something entirely different. They called him by one name, the oppressor. But history books hide an important truth. This conflict began with a very small incident.
Patience, everyone. We'll be through soon.
All is in order. You may proceed. Thank you, sir.
The Habsburg bailiffs, medieval tax collectors armed with swords, began to cross their limits. They would seize farmers' crops by force, demand impossible and unrealistic taxes, and most terrifying of all,
these carvings match the old tales. The patterns are ancient. We must be careful. Let's survey the area first. Agreed. No venturing into the mists.
they were seizing ancient communal lands in the Duke's name. In one village, a bailiff named Gessler committed an inhumane act.
My people, we must stand united. The mountains protect us, but vigilance is our shield.
Aye, we stand ready.
Then let our resolve be known.
He forced villagers to bow before a hat placed on top of a pole. Yes, the legend of William Tell is rooted in this very real oppression. But the Swiss response was something that would shake history itself. Instead of bowing, they formed a confederation, a united defensive alliance. Just imagine, in an age where questioning your lord meant certain death, these ordinary farmers united to create a pact of mutual protection.
The time has come to invoke the ancient powers.
We are ready.
Then let the ritual begin.
They would gather in secret on moonlit, dew-covered fields, where the silence of night made the entire mountain feel as if it was holding its breath. There, they swore oaths upon their farming tools, spades, sickles, sticks, placing their hands on them as they pledged loyalty to one another. This was no royal army assembly. This was an extraordinary resistance of ordinary people. From this secret alliance, they chose their own leaders from among themselves. A wealthy farmer from Schwyz, Vera Starfacer, gradually emerged as their military coordinator.
We stand at the threshold of our future. The mountains have protected us, but we must build our destiny. Let us unite and claim this land.
He was neither a noble nor a knight. He was an ordinary man, tilling soil, growing crops, raising livestock. His hands had never held a sword. His hands were connected to the earth, to real life. But Duke Leopold did not see this as a simple rebellion. In his eyes, it was a dangerous infection, an idea that, if it spread, could destroy the entire empire. His fear ran deep. If the farmers of the Alps could govern themselves, then why not Austria? Why not Bavaria? And why not the entire Habsburg Empire? This was the question that could rob kings of their sleep. From here, the situation grew even more dangerous. Leopold decided this idea of democracy must be crushed before it could be born. He assembled the largest punitive army the region had ever seen.
With courage in your hearts and steel in your hands, we march to glory.
The Swiss were left with only two choices: submit or fight. But they chose a third path. They didn't just accept war, they decided to change the rules of war itself.
My people, the maps reveal the enemy's path. They will strike from the northern pass. We must act now. Fortify the villages. Our unity will prevail.
In hidden valleys after Sunday church prayers, the farmers began training with a new kind of weapon. No, it wasn't a sword, something they couldn't afford. No, it wasn't armor, something they couldn't wear. They were training in something far more terrifying.
This valley leads to the citadel. We must cross the river. The eastern pass is treacherous, but it's our only path.
Agreed. We leave at dawn.
Coordination. But the question remained, how could farmers stand against an empire built on cavalry power? Duke Leopold's army was a true medieval superpower. A total of 9,000 troops, including 2,000 heavily armored cavalry knights and 7,000 infantry from various Habsburg regions. Each knight wore perfectly crafted steel armor weighing 60 to 80 pounds, forged by master armorers. Their war horses were so expensive that even 10 years of a village's income couldn't buy one.
Soldiers of the realm, we stand on the edge of destiny. Let your hearts be steel, your courage unyielding. Who will ride with me to victory? We honor and glory!
Noble forces from Austria, Swabia, and Burgundy joined them, all with one goal: to crush this peasant rebellion. Imagine a knight preparing for battle. He wears heavy chainmail, layered with steel plate armor, and his helmet allows him to see only through a narrow slit. They were like moving tanks, almost unstoppable, impossible to defeat with conventional weapons. The Austrians did not yet realize what terrifying force was waiting for them ahead. These men had been preparing for war since childhood, starting at the age of 7. They learned swordsmanship, horsemanship, and various combat techniques. In their eyes, fighting peasants wasn't even a war. It was more like a game, a one-sided spectacle, because they couldn't imagine that ordinary peasants could mount real resistance. Compared to them, the Swiss force seemed almost laughably weak. Only 1,500 Confederates, most of them farmers and herdsmen, but in their hands was a revolutionary weapon: the pike, a 10 to 18-foot ash wood shaft, tipped with a sharp iron blade. It looked simple, cheap to make, yet its impact was devastating. Each pike weighed only 5 to 7 pounds. But by the laws of physics, this simple weapon was about to become unstoppable. Then there was another weapon, the halberd, a weapon that seemed designed specifically to break armor, an axe blade to cut, a sharp spike to strike.
Ha! Hold! Well done! Aye!
And a hook that could pull a knight off his horse. In short, it was an armor opener. But the real strength of the Swiss wasn't in their weapons. Their true power was in their training. They trained together. Every Sunday, after church prayers, the entire village would gather. No, they didn't practice individual duels like knights. They learned to move together, to strike together, to act as one, as if they were no longer separate individuals, but a single, living entity. They learned to lower their pikes together, to step forward in unison, and to become a coordinated machine of death.
Soldiers! The enemy approaches! Ready spears! Advance on my command!
Aye for the realm! Forward with march!
Hold the line! No retreat!
Remember this number: 18 feet of ash wood. It was so long that, longer than any sword, even more effective than a knight's lance in close combat. Now the real factor: geography. Morgarten Pass was a narrow path, only 50 meters wide. On one side lay the vast Lake Ari, on the other, steep and terrifying mountain slopes. It was, in essence, a natural death trap. A 2-kilometer corridor capable of destroying an entire army if used correctly. Duke Leopold's scouts reported a clear path because in his mind, peasants would never choose the battlefield. Leopold's contempt dripped from every word he spoke. According to him,
Brothers, the enemy approaches from the east. We will flank them here, on the ridge.
A sound plan, my lord.
Good. Prepare your men. We march at dawn.
these mountain peasants will flee at the first charge, and if they don't, we will cut them down like wheat before a scythe. His battle plan was dangerously simple: march through Morgarten Pass, crush the rebels with numerical superiority, and hang their leaders as a warning to others. The math of death was terrifyingly simple, yet completely misleading. 9,000 versus 1,500 steel versus wood. Lifelong trained professional knights versus barely trained peasant militia. Anyone using simple logic would expect one outcome: total annihilation. But history has proven again and again, wars aren't won by numbers alone. Sometimes terrain, strategy, and timing change everything. The next 30 seconds was about to change not just a battle, but the future of an era. November 15th, just before dawn, as Leopold's massive army prepared to march, a completely different scene was unfolding in the mountains above. Auffaser silently positioned his men along the high slopes of Morgarten Pass, behind trees, within shadows of rocks, inside the mist.
They're advancing. Hold steady.
Aye, spears ready.
On my mark, advance!
They had become part of nature itself, no longer like men. They were waiting, because they knew the battle wouldn't begin here. It would begin only when they decided. The Swiss had an advantage no knight or imperial army had ever imagined. They didn't just know the terrain, they knew every breadth of the mountains, every stone's weight, every tree's position. This wasn't just a battlefield to them. It was their homeland, their memory, a part of their existence. And they had turned this familiar world into a deadly trap, something never before seen in European warfare. November 15th, 1315. Two completely different realities were moving toward each other. Dawn light slowly spread across Lake Igeri. A cold mist blanketed the valley in mystery. The Austrian army advanced in a massive column stretching nearly 2 miles. Their steps confident, heavy, unstoppable. War banners flew in the wind, the red lion of Habsburg, and the personal sigils of 24 noble knightly houses. At the front rode Duke Leopold himself, his armor so polished that in the dawn light he seemed less human. And more like a walking symbol of metal. Around him stood his most loyal knights, who fully believed this battle was merely a formality. Above, hidden in the mountains, the Swiss watched everything, their eyes steady, breathing slow, minds ready for the storm. They had been preparing for this moment for 3 days, but they built no forts, raised no walls, because that would have alerted the enemy. Instead, they did something far more deadly. They loosened massive boulders, waiting now for just a single push. They arranged tree trunks so that rolling at the right angle could shatter an entire army. Most importantly, they learned to wait. Because in this battle, it wasn't strength, timing itself was the weapon. 8 a.m., the Austrian vanguard entered the narrow Morgarten Pass, where the path was so tight that no more than 4 knights could move side by side. The knights advanced in rows of 4. Behind them, thousands of infantry followed with confidence, believing the armored knights ahead were their shield. The entire army looked like a massive metal serpent, slowly slithering into the mountain corridor. Everything was perfectly controlled, everything filled with confidence. But then, a sound shook the entire valley. A horn echoed across the mountains. But it was not a royal war horn. It was a simple farmer's cow horn. And in that moment, it felt as if time itself stopped. The mountains suddenly came alive. Huge rocks began to roll down from above, slowly at first, then with terrifying speed. Spinning logs smashed into horses' legs. The sound of iron and bone echoed through the valley. That disciplined war column, which moments ago seemed like an unbreakable wall of steel, collapsed into unimaginable chaos within seconds. The rules of battle, discipline, and control all began to crumble at once. The heavily armored knights could barely move as they wished. Their bodies felt more like metal prisons than living beings. The horses screamed in terror. Some lunged forward, some tried to flee backward, others reared violently, throwing their riders to the ground. And in the midst of that chaos, the real strike hadn't even begun yet. This was only the first phase, a cold, calculated strategy. Its goal wasn't just to break morale, but to shatter their entire structure. The falling rocks and logs weren't just meant to strike, they were weapons of psychological and physical pressure. There was only one objective: to compress the Austrian army, push them tighter, and trap them in the narrowest space possible.
Soldiers of the realm, the enemy is near! For the realm! Forward, for honor and victory!
The Austrian commanders still relied on their training. Hold formation, raise shields, reform ranks. Their shouts echoed through the mountain pass, but reality was brutally unforgiving. In this 50-meter narrow corridor, with a vast lake on one side and sheer rock walls on the other, no formation could survive here. All advanced tactics became useless in this terrain. And then, from above, the mountains came that war cry, a powerful, clear, unified shout. Confederates for freedom.
Charge! For honor and victory! For the king! Charge! Forward, brothers, no retreat!
For freedom, Confederates! And in that moment, the battle was no longer just defense. It became a full-scale uprising. The Swiss descended the slopes, but they were no scattered crowd. They were a living war formation, a perfectly arranged pike wall, 4 ranks deep. Every step was calculated, every movement synchronized, every pike angled with precision. It felt less like men and more like a single, massive weapon. Now imagine that moment. You are a knight, trained since childhood, that war is about personal courage, duels, and direct charges. You believe your armor, your horse, your training make you invincible. But what's coming toward you is not a person, it is a moving wall, a silent, disciplined, unstoppable flow of human steel. And before that wall, even the finest armor in the world loses its meaning, because these pikes are no longer just wood and iron, they have become instruments of precise death. The armor you thought would protect you is now proof of your final helplessness.
Soldiers of the realm! Our banners fly high! Forward to victory! Let the mountains witness our glory! Charge with me and claim our destiny!
And at that very moment, the first counterattack begins with Count Rudolf of Habsburg, a relative of Duke Leopold himself. His horse was trained, experienced, built for war. But when it saw the wall of pikes ahead, something unusual happened. The horse stopped. Its legs froze into the ground. It refused to move forward because by nature animals sensed the fear long before humans do. But then came the final moment. Count Rudolf was thrown forward from his horse and slammed directly onto the waiting pikes. A 200-pound man.
For the king! Hold them! I will not yield!
Covered in 80 pounds of steel armor against fixed, sharpened iron tips, this wasn't a battle.
Forward! For honor and victory! Ha! For the realm! Steady the line! Press on! Charge to battle!
It was a brutal demonstration of physics. The pikes pierced through his chest armor as if it were soft cloth, not metal. And in that moment, not even a second of silence fell over the battlefield. Only a terrifying realization took hold. Meanwhile, far back in the column, Duke Leopold,
Soldiers of the realm!
slowly began to understand the truth. This was no battle. This was a carefully planned trap, a mountain pass. The route he thought was safe had become a brutal slaughter corridor. One terrifying question filled his mind. Where is the way back now? Because his army stretched nearly 2 miles, the front lines were being destroyed. While the rear had no idea what awaited them, they were slowly moving deeper into that terrifying meat grinder, into tighter spaces, into suffocating conditions. There was no way back, no room to step aside. And that's exactly why Morgarten remains so important in history. because for the first time in medieval history, disciplined infantry proved they could overpower elite mounted knights. This was not luck, nor was it just terrain advantage. It was a completely new way of thinking, tactical innovation. The Swiss didn't just use pikes. They used them in a coordinated formation, multiplying the effectiveness of every weapon. Here comes the pattern interrupt. Something rarely explained clearly in history books. The Swiss formation was never static. It was a living, moving war system.
Steady, men! Brace for the charge! For the realm! Charge! Break their line! Ha! March!
The front line struck forward, then dropped to their knees. The second line struck over their heads. Then they too lowered down. The third and fourth lines applied constant pressure. An unending wave of strikes. There were no gaps, no weaknesses, only a relentless stream of death flowing downhill. The Austrians desperately tried everything. Crossbowmen couldn't aim in the cramped space. Infantry with swords and axes couldn't breach the long reach of the pikes. The heavily armored knights had become so slow they were like prisoners. The Swiss had shaped the battlefield so that
Forward for honor and victory! Hail the Lion Banner! Advance!
every Austrian advantage turned into a weakness. Then the Swiss did something that shattered every rule of medieval warfare. The Swiss pike formation struck into the compressed Austrian line like an avalanche of wood and iron crashing down. 4 ranks deep, each level aimed at different heights: knee level, waist level, chest level, and head level. A complete multi-level killing zone. No horse would charge this wall. No armor could block attacks from multiple levels at once. The impact was devastating. The frontline knights had no room to retreat. Their own men were pushing them forward into the pikes. And the Swiss executed something terrifyingly precise. Strike together, pull back together, strike again, like a routine practiced thousands of times. But it didn't end there. The Swiss didn't stop to loot bodies. They didn't stop to take prisoners, unlike medieval norms. They didn't stop. They kept advancing, step, strike. The formation never broke, never stopped, never hesitated. Behind the pikemen came the halberdiers, finishing off any wounded or fallen enemy. The math here was brutally simple. An 18-foot pike meant you could kill long before a sword could reach you.
Charge for the king! Hold the line! Repel them! Press on! Break their ranks!
Count Hermann of Seely desperately called his men. Hold! Hold! Stand for Austria! But in that very moment, 3 pikes struck him at once. 1 in the groin, 1 in the stomach, 1 in the throat.
Knights of the realm, forward to victory! For honor, for the king! None shall stand before us!
His famed gold-adorned armor couldn't save him, because this wasn't about strength, it was the brutal reality of coordinated physics. Here lies the greatest truth about war. Something your teachers never told you. Medieval armor always had gaps, because mobility required those openings. The Swiss knew every weakness of their enemies, the gaps under the arms, beneath the neck guard, the narrow visor slits, all were fatally vulnerable to a precisely aimed pike strike. But they had discovered another terrifying truth. The horses, unlike their riders, were not fully armored. That was the greatest weakness. If the horse is struck, the knight is no longer a deadly warrior. He becomes a helpless, 280-pound metal turtle, lying overturned on the ground. So the Swiss struck low, breaking legs, cutting away mobility, turning wounded, screaming horses into obstacles. These dead and wounded animals compressed the Austrian column even more. This was no longer a battle. It became a calculated execution. As the pike wall pushed the Austrians toward the lake, Swiss halberdiers moved through the chaos, like farmers harvesting crops, except the crop was human. The halberd was perfect for this task. Its axe blade could shatter helmets. Its spike could pierce armor gaps, but most terrifying was the hook.
For honor and glory! Charge! Advance!
This single feature changed everything. Imagine this. A knight's greatest advantage was height. He towered above infantry from horseback. But the halberd's hook turned that advantage into a death trap. Swiss fighters hooked the knight's neck or arm joints, and then gravity did the rest. Once on the ground, a heavily armored knight could barely rise again. He was no longer a warrior. He became a helpless target, waiting for death. And the halberd's spike delivered the final judgment. Baron Friedrich von Thunberg felt that fate brutally. Dragged from his horse, he slammed to the ground. His armor pinned him to the earth like a prison. He tried to surrender. He offered money, ransom, gold. But the Swiss gave only one answer. A halberd spike driven straight through his helmet.
Rally! Onward to the water! Aye, sir! Moving out! Watch the flanks, no stragglers!
There was no ransom, no noble privilege, only death in the mud, just like any common soldier. Then another brutal force entered the field. Physics. Austrian infantry tried to escape. Some climbed the slopes, others fled toward the lake. But both paths led to death. Those who climbed the mountains were crushed by rocks and logs because the Swiss were ready above. Those who fled to the lake discovered a brutal truth. You cannot swim in armor. The halberd harvest continued, a cold, mechanical destruction. Each fallen knight cracked the foundations of feudalism. They weren't just soldiers, they were pillars of a system, those who fought, ruled, and upheld order. Each death marked the end of a family's legacy. At the western edge lay Lake Ägeri, and as Swiss pressure increased, hundreds of Austrians were pushed into the water. Knights who spent fortunes on armor now discovered their greatest mistake. Steel does not float. The lake's water slowly turned red with noble blood, as if the lake itself bore witness and changed color.
No, not you. Please. Wake up, we have to go. I won't leave you. Help me, someone!
Heinrich von Hunenberg made it just 20 feet from shore before his heavy armor dragged him down, as if iron had bound him forever to the water. Beside him was his squire, a young attendant. He tried desperately to save him, but in the end, both drowned. The Swiss lined pikemen along the shore, ensuring no escape by water. Those who removed armor to swim, they were speared in the water like fish. But this moment still chills historians, because the Swiss showed no mercy. There was an unwritten rule of medieval war: nobles were ransomed, not killed. But these peasants ignored that rule. They had endured years of oppression under the House of Habsburg. They had seen crops stolen, homes burned, neighbors hanged. For them, this was no longer war.
Behold the cost of this victory. We cannot let their sacrifice be in vain. Soldiers, we press on!
It was judgment. Every drowned knight was revenge. Duke Leopold watched from the center, his world sinking before his eyes. These were no longer chivalric warriors, they were organized peasants who had discovered common men can kill nobles. The impossible became inevitable, water and blood merged, and many chose drowning over pike wounds. Some accounts say the Swiss pushed floating knights back under with halberds. Others claim peasants waited in the water to finish the wounded. What is certain, Lake Ägeri became a mass grave, but the slaughter was not over. The column was so compressed, many never even reached the battlefield.
Stay together! Advance! Spears ready for the king! Forward, no retreat!
They waited only for death. Panic spread faster than orders. An organized army collapsed into chaos.
Not while I draw breath.